The dust in Wagon Spur rose like desperate prayers that June afternoon, spinning through the sunlit air like gold ghosts of the past. Iris Conincaid stood on her porch, clutching a crumpled sheet of paper that could destroy everything her late husband had built. The new territorial law, signed by men who had never worked a day of land in their lives, declared that widows must remarry within 3 months or forfeit their property. 3 months had passed since she buried her husband, and now, by sundown, she would lose it all. Abner Lyle's shadow darkened her doorway long before his words reached her. His boots crunched slow on the gravel path, his polished hat tilted just enough to catch the light. 6 hours, Mrs. Conincaid, he said, tapping his silver pocket watch. 6 hours to find yourself a husband. Otherwise, the land returns to the territory or to someone capable of managing it. The smile that followed wasn't kindness. It was victory disguised as courtesy. Everyone in Wagon Spur knew Lyle wanted her land, not for the dry wheat fields or the little cabin she called home, but for what ran beneath it, silver veins that her husband had found just weeks before the accident that took his life. Iris's fingers trembled around the document, but her jaw stayed firm. "You'll get your answer before sunset, Mr. Lyle," she said, her voice calm despite the tremor in her heart. As he walked away, dust swirling around his polished boots, she felt the last of her fear turn into something sharper, defiance. She put on her black mourning dress, the same one she had worn at her husband's funeral. Its color had faded to charcoal, but the grief still clung to the fabric. She tied her hair back, straightened her shoulders, and tucked the deed papers into her satchel. Then she marched straight into town. The boardwalk creaked beneath her boots as she passed by the mercantile, the barber, the post office. Heads turned. Voices whispered. A widow walking alone, heading straight for the saloon at midday. It was enough to set every tongue wagging. Inside, the smell of whiskey and smoke clung to the air. Men turned to stare as she stepped through the swinging doors. Dr. Talley, the town's physician, sat in his usual corner, smirking behind his glass. "Mrs. Conincaid," he drawled. "Surely you've come to the wrong establishment." But Iris ignored him. Her eyes swept the room, searching every face. The miners, the ranch hands, the shopkeeper. All men who owed Lyle favors or feared his power. None would dare marry her, even for show. And then she saw him. A stranger, broad-shouldered, trail-dusted, sitting alone at the bar. His hat lay beside a half-empty glass of whiskey. His eyes, gray as storm clouds, met hers with quiet curiosity. Iris didn't hesitate. She walked straight to him, her heart hammering so loud she thought the whole room could hear. "Are you married?" she asked. Every head turned. Silence filled the saloon like the pause before a gunfight. The man looked at her, calm and unreadable. "No, ma'am," he said, his voice carrying a slow southern drawl. "I need a husband before sundown," Iris said plainly. $50 now. 50 when the deed's signed. Then you can be on your way." For a long moment he just studied her, then he nodded once. "Name's Jude Ransom," he said. Before he could say more, Dr. Talley stood. "Mrs. Conincaid, think carefully before embarrassing yourself further," he sneered. Abner Lyle's voice followed from the door. "The good doctor's right. A hasty marriage won't change the law." His words carried false sympathy, but his eyes glinted like a man watching a cornered animal. That's when Iris did something that froze every man in that saloon. She turned toward Jude Ransom, her chin high, and said loud enough for the whole room to hear, "Undress me now, or I'll do it myself." Quote. The words crashed through the silence like a gunshot. Men dropped their cards, glasses paused midair. Jude blinked once, and then, understanding her plan, stood to his full height. "I believe the Justice of Peace has an office down the street," he said calmly, offering his arm. "Shall we, Mrs. Conincaid?" The saloon erupted in whispers. Porter Vance, the shopkeeper, stood suddenly. "I'll witness," he called, his voice shaking. "Agnes Fairweather can be the second. She's still teaching at the schoolhouse." Iris took Jude's arm, her head high, as they stepped out into the blazing sunlight. Behind them, Lyle's jaw tightened. His trap was slipping. They walked through the dusty street like a wedding procession, every curious face leaning from porches and windows. By the time they reached Justice Hatch's small office, half the town knew of the widow's scandalous proposal. Inside, the justice looked up, startled, as the widow and the stranger entered. His spectacles slipped down his nose. "A wedding? Now?" "Yes," Iris said. "Right now." She placed her husband's gold pocket watch on the desk. "For your trouble." The justice nodded nervously and fetched his ledger. Porter Vance and Agnes Fairweather entered moments later, breathless from their rush to witness history. As the ceremony began, the setting sun painted the window in amber light. Time was running out. "Do you take this man?" "I do," Iris said before the justice could finish. "Do you take this woman?" "I do," Jude replied, his voice steady as stone. Justice Hatch barely finished signing the certificate when the door burst open. Abner Lyle stood there, flanked by Dr. Talley. "This farce won't hold in court," Lyle sneered. Jude's hand rested on his holster. "The certificate's signed, witnessed and sealed," he said. "The law requires proof of consummation." Dr. Talley smirked. "I'll need to verify it myself." Gasps filled the room. Porter Vance stepped forward, furious. "That's not written in any law book." Justice Hatch grabbed his dusty volume, flipping through trembling pages. "The statute says the marriage must be binding and complete by sunset." Iris turned toward Jude, her eyes blazing. "Then, we'll make it complete," she said firmly, grabbing his arm. "You're all welcome to watch us walk to my cabin." The town followed them down the street as the sun sank into fire. Lyle's face burned red behind them. The widow, who was supposed to lose everything, had just turned his own law into her weapon. When the cabin door shut behind Iris and Jude, the crowd lingered outside, waiting for scandal. Inside, Iris drew the curtains and lit the oil lamp. Her hands trembled as she turned toward her new husband. "They'll watch the cabin all night," she said quietly. "We'll have to play the part." Jude leaned against the wall, his voice calm. "I've seen worse assignments," he said. For the first time all day, Iris smiled. A small, tired smile that carried both fear and defiance. "Then let's survive the night, Mr. Ransom," she whispered. Outside, the last light of day faded, and with it, the last hold Abner Lyle had over her future. Morning light crept softly through the curtains of Iris Conincaid's cabin, painting thin lines across the worn wooden floor. The small room smelled of smoke, coffee, and the faintest trace of wild sage that hung from the rafters. Jude Ransom sat in a chair by the door, revolver resting on his thigh, hat pulled low over his eyes. He hadn't slept. Iris lay on the bed still fully dressed, the blankets rumpled to make it appear as though the marriage had been properly completed. It had been a night of pretending, but pretending had saved her land. A quiet knock broke the stillness. "Breakfast," came a familiar voice. It was Agnes Fairweather, the schoolteacher, and their witness. Iris opened the door just enough to let her in. Agnes's sharp eyes took in the scene, the separate sleeping places, the faint tension between them, but she said nothing. "Tally's watching from the mercantile porch," she warned softly. "He's already telling folks he heard no evidence of marital bliss." Jude rose slowly, stretching his back as he reached for the coffee pot. "Let him talk," he said, pouring a cup and handing it to Iris. "Rumors don't scare me, but I'd like to know what we're really fighting, Mrs. Ransom." She met his gaze, surprised by the name that now legally belonged to her. "Lyle's greed," she said simply, setting down her cup. "And the poison he's pouring into this land." Quote, she knelt by the hearth, lifted a loose board, and pulled out a small iron box. Inside were coins, a few folded papers, and a small glass vial filled with cloudy water. "This is from the creek behind our property," she explained, holding it up to the light. "It used to run clear. Now it kills everything that drinks from it. Lyle's refinery sits upstream. My husband warned him about the waste months before his accident." Quote, Jude's expression darkened. "He was mining under your land." She nodded. "And when James refused to sell, his tunnel collapsed. They called it a cave-in. I called it murder. Before he could answer, another knock rattled the door, harder this time. "Mrs. Ransom," Dr. Talley's slick voice carried through the thin wood. "By order of the territory, I must verify the consummation of this marriage." Jude stepped forward, opening the door just wide enough to show his shadow and the barrel of his revolver gleaming in the morning light. "My wife requires no examination," he said quietly. "You come again, doctor, and I'll consider it trespassing." Quote. Talley's smirk faltered. He backed away, muttering something about legal procedures before disappearing down the path. Iris watched Jude latch the door. "You didn't have to do that," she said softly. "Yes, I did," he replied. "I don't take kindly to men who think they can own others." They spent the rest of the morning tracing the creek bed together. Iris carried her satchel of glass bottles while Jude scouted ahead, his eyes sharp from years of soldiering. When they reached the water's edge, the truth became plain. Fish floated belly up, their silver scales dull and lifeless. The rocks glistened with a strange yellow film that smelled of rot and metal. "This wasn't carelessness," Jude said grimly. "This was done to hide something." A rustle from the trees made Iris turn. An older Apache man stepped into view, his long gray hair braided neatly, eyes clear and steady. "Tohi Nez," Iris said with relief. "He's been helping me gather evidence." The healer nodded at Jude, his gaze calm but assessing. "New husband brings new trouble," he said, "or maybe new strength." Quote. They followed Tohi into a shaded ravine where he had hidden dozens of bottles and pages of notes, records of poisoned wells, dead livestock, and families sickened by the tainted water. "Lyle dumps mercury and lead," he said, holding up a cracked jar of cloudy liquid. 27 deaths in 2 years, all written off by your doctor as bad luck. Jude crouched beside the evidence, studying it like a soldier reading a map before battle. "We'll need more than words to make a court believe this," he said. "We'll have proof," Iris replied, "and witnesses." By the time they returned to town, the air felt heavier. Men in fine coats, Lyle's men, watched them from doorways. One of them spat into the dust as Iris passed. "Careful, Mrs. Ransom," he sneered. "People might start thinking you forgot how to behave." Jude stopped walking. His gray eyes turned cold. "Say that again." The man took one look at him and decided against it. That evening, as the sun bled into the horizon, Agnes arrived at the cabin with 2 more allies, Porter Vance and Edgar Lom, a refinery chemist who'd once worked for Lyle. The man's hands shook as he opened his satchel. Inside were papers, sketches, and chemical formulas. "He ordered me to dump waste into the creek," Edgar said hoarsely. "I warned him it would poison the valley. He didn't care." Iris spread the documents across the table, her eyes blazing with purpose. "Then these will hang him." Jude leaned over the papers. "We'll need to guard them. Lyle won't sit quiet while we build a case." He was right. That night, as wind hissed through the pines, Iris woke to the sound of boots on gravel. Jude was already up, pistol drawn, moving like a man who had lived half his life in ambushes. The sound faded, leaving only silence and the cry of a distant coyote. "They're watching," he murmured, "waiting for us to slip." Iris sat by the lamp, her fingers trembling slightly. "I've lived in fear since the day James died," she said quietly. "I'm done hiding." Quote. Jude holstered his gun and looked at her, really looked at her, the defiant set of her jaw, the exhaustion beneath her strength. "Then you're braver than most soldiers I knew," he said. For the first time since her husband's death, Iris felt something shift inside her. Not safety, not yet, but trust. The kind that grows between 2 people who've faced the same darkness and refused to back down. Outside, the creek murmured faintly through the night, carrying with it the secrets of men who thought they could bury the truth. But Iris Conincaid and Jude Ransom were done being silent. Tomorrow they would start a war for the soul of Wagon Spur. The sun rose red over Wagon Spur, bleeding across the rooftops like a warning. The town woke uneasy. Windows cracked open just enough to spy on whoever dared walk the streets. Word had spread that Iris Conincaid, now Mrs. Ransom, and her unlikely husband were preparing to confront Abner Lyle himself. The widow who once grieved alone had become the talk of the frontier, and half the town held its breath waiting to see how far she'd go. Jude was already saddling the horse when Iris stepped outside, her dark hair tied back and a satchel of papers clutched in her hand. Inside that satchel was everything: water samples, refinery maps, Edgar Lam's signed confession, and the torn pages Agnes had copied from the territorial law books. The evidence that could either save them or get them killed. "They'll come for this before sundown," Jude said, tightening the cinch strap. "Then we'll get it to the judge before they do," Iris replied. The territorial circuit judge, Harlan Whitaker, was due to arrive that morning. His reputation was clean, one of the few men not tangled in Lyle's pocket. For the first time in months, hope flickered across Wagon Spur, but Lyle struck first. A crash shattered the quiet. Porter Vance burst through the cabin door, panting, his face pale. "They've raided Tohi's hut," he gasped. "Smashed every bottle, burned his notes. They're destroying evidence before the judge arrives." Jude didn't hesitate. "We move now." They galloped toward town, the trail winding along the poisoned creek. Smoke rose from the direction of Tohi's small home, curling like black snakes against the morning sky. The healers stood outside with calm dignity amid the wreckage, clutching a leather pouch to his chest. "They destroyed much," he said simply, "but not all." From the pouch, he pulled 3 intact vials and a small bound journal. "Proof survives." Iris squeezed his arm. "Then we still have a chance." When they reached the meeting hall, the square was already crowded. Families gathered in tight clusters, mothers clutching sick children, ranchers muttering about dead cattle. Even those who once ignored Iris now stood beside her, united by shared suffering. Judge Whitaker, a tall man with iron-gray hair and sharp eyes, took his seat behind a simple wooden table. "We'll hear both sides," he announced, his voice echoing through the tense hall. "Let truth speak louder than money." Lyle arrived moments later with 2 lawyers and Dr. Talley in tow. His smile was polished but tight. "Your Honor, we contest the validity of this so-called marriage," he began smoothly. "The lady acted from hysteria and indecency, not lawful intent." Iris rose from her seat beside Jude, her voice steady. "You changed the law to steal my land, Mr. Lyle. That was your intent." The crowd murmured. The judge raised a hand for silence. "Mrs. Ransom, you claim evidence of foul play?" "I do," she said, laying the papers on his table. "The refinery's waste poisoned our water. The same poison that killed children, livestock, and my husband." Tohi Nez stepped forward next, presenting his samples and charts. "Mercury and arsenic," he explained in careful English. "Dumped upstream, each death follows contamination." I marked them all. Edgar Lam followed, trembling but resolute. "I designed the refinery," he confessed. "Mr. Lyle ordered me to dispose of waste directly into the creek to save money. These are his written orders." He placed signed documents before the judge. Gasps rippled through the crowd. Dr. Talley tried to recover the ground. "Nonsense. The illnesses are from poor hygiene, not chemicals." Agnes Fairweather rose from her seat, eyes blazing. "Then explain why your death certificates match the symptoms of mercury poisoning," she said, holding up copies of his own records. "You signed them all." The judge's face hardened. "Dr. Talley, you will remain silent until called." Lyle's confident smirk faltered for the first time. His lawyer tried to argue technicalities, but Jude's deep, steady voice cut through. "During the war, I saw men poison wells to cripple their enemies. Mr. Lyle has done the same here. He just wore finer clothes while doing it." The judge leaned back, studying Lyle as if measuring the weight of his soul. "You'd poison your neighbors for silver, sir?" Lyle stood abruptly. "You can't prove intent," he barked. "And that marriage is a sham." Jude took Iris's hand, standing tall beside her. "It was real enough to save her land," he said quietly. "And it's real enough now." The judge nodded slowly. "I've heard enough." He shuffled the papers, then struck the table once with his gavel. "This court finds the widow remarriage amendment invalid, conceived through corruption and conflict of interest. Mrs. Ransom's marriage stands legal and binding." Gasps turned to cheers, but the judge wasn't finished. "As for the contamination, Mr. Lyle and Dr. Talley are hereby charged with criminal negligence and conspiracy to defraud this territory. The refinery will be seized and repaired under citizen oversight." The hall erupted. People cried, laughed, hugged one another. For the first time in years, Wagon Spur belonged to its people, not to fear. Lyle tried to storm out, but 2 deputies blocked his way. His watch chain glinted in the light as he spat. "You think this changes anything?" Quote, "It already has," Iris said, her voice calm but firm. "The land will heal, even if men like you never do." Weeks passed. The creek began to clear, its poisoned shimmer fading to true silver beneath the sun. Iris's garden flourished again, her herbs feeding both body and spirit. Jude stayed on, repairing fences and roofs, though neither of them spoke of the day he might leave. One evening, as the sky turned to fire behind the hills, he found her sitting on the porch with a mug of coffee. "You ever think about what comes next?" he asked quietly. She smiled, eyes soft but steady. "Every day." "But I stopped planning for endings, Mr. Ransom. I only plan for what's worth keeping." He set his hat beside her and sat down, the silence between them comfortable now, not heavy. "Then maybe I'll stay a while longer," he said. "Maybe you already have," she replied. A warm wind swept through the valley, carrying the faint sound of the creek running clean again. Somewhere in the distance, a child laughed, the sound of a future reclaimed. Iris looked toward the horizon where the last light burned gold across the land she had fought to save. What began as desperation had become destiny. The woman who once said, "Undress me now or I'll do it myself," had stripped more than convention that day. She had torn away fear, shame, and every lie that said a woman couldn't stand her ground in a man's world. And in doing so, she'd found not just justice, but love.